started because we got a lot to cover today. So welcome to DIY herbal concoction making. First, a few Zoom housekeeping tips and tricks. You have all been on a million Zoom calls at this point, but just remember to keep your microphone muted for bandwidth purposes. We are going to be showing a couple of videos today, so we're going to ask you to keep your videos off, again, for bandwidth. And when they play, they might stutter and stop a little bit depending on your bandwidth and your internet connection. Don't worry, we are recording this. We are going to send links to the video we're recording now and the videos that are embedded in it, so you'll see all that. We recommend you use speaker view. It's the best way to watch what's going on. There's a chat window for comments to the group or individuals. If you need technical assistance, you can chat directly with Vanessa Ackerman, who is our tech hostess. And there's a Q&A function for questions, and you can ask questions either through the chat or the Q&A. Both of them work. If you want to see what's being said on the screen in text through closed captioning, there's a button at the bottom. CC Live Script is the name of the button. Just click that and you'll get a readout of what's being said. And after this class, as I said, we're going to send out the presentation. So if you miss something, don't worry, it's coming. This workshop and all the workshops we presented this year are being sponsored by the Friends of the UCSC Farm and Garden. We are a support group that supports the Center for Agroecology and all the work that they do. And becoming a member gives you all kinds of wonderful perks, including 10% off everything at San Lorenzo Garden Supply and Sierra Azul Nursery, which is a wonderful nursery in Watsonville, and 10% off plants at the garden company. Lots of other benefits if you have not joined or become a friend. Vanessa has just put the link in the chat, so feel free to become a friend at this time. So these are our panelists today, all very accomplished herbalists in their own right. Paula was unable to join us in person. She is having a family emergency, and I believe she's on her way to Europe or England. So she will be joining us via a video recording, and she'll be the last presenter tonight. Our agenda, what are we going to make? So we didn't really talk about that in the description. We're going to learn how to make some herbal preparations, and that includes a fire cider. I didn't know what that was before, maybe you didn't, so we'll find out what that is. A healing tea, a syrup made of elderberry by the Elderberry Princess, who grows them, sells them, makes the syrup, and a healing salve. And now I'm going to present Darren, who's going to do the tea. Take it away. Darren, you're muted.
Unmuted. Okay.
Hello,
everybody. It's great to be here with you all, sort of, kinda. And I'm really looking forward to sharing about how to make an early stage, I'm getting sick tea from your garden or from easily acquirable herbs from the grocery store or maybe from a local health food store. And I love herbal teas, and I am a clinical herbalist, and that's basically what I dispense, mostly teas as well as tinctures. And but I love the process of teas and gathering plants from one's garden, and in order to try to keep oneself well or kind of fend off pathogens and dis-ease or disharmonies. And so I have a bunch of herbal friends here. You can't see them the way the camera is, but I'll kind of talk about some of them. And so many of these you might have in your garden or even in your spice chest, like this oregano. And so, you know, for me, it felt really, really important to talk about what can we do when we start feeling like, oh, something's not right? I'm starting to feel like I have something's trying to kind of get in. So I'm starting to get a little bit of a cold, or some pathogens trying to get in. And we start feeling these initial feelings like, oh, maybe I'm tired. I don't know why I'm tired. I slept well last night. Or we might start feeling some tightness or some achiness. Or many of us have this feeling of like, we can attune to there's just not something right that's happening. We might start feeling a little bit of like runny nose or a little drippiness. We might start having a very early stage little tickle in our throat, right? So these are all signs that something's amiss, right? And that some pathogen is trying to get in our system. In traditional Chinese medicine, we talk about that the wind blows things in, right, to the surface of our body, and that pathogen tries to penetrate into deeper levels of the body and get into organ systems. Most of us have probably experienced that, a cold that is a head cold, or at first we just kind of feel a little kind of fever and chills, but then eventually we're like, it's sunk into my lungs. So what we can do in the very early stage of things is try to like fend that off, right? In Western physiological understanding, many of these pathogens, right, viruses especially, they try to like sink in kind of and attach to the mucous membranes and then start replicating there. And so can we make that environment inhospitable, right, to these pathogens, right, this wind invasion, these pathogenic factors that are coming forth? And so I'm going to teach you today a way that you can take things from your garden or from your kitchen and activate your system and catalyze a strong response to basically try to push the pathogen out of your system. Okay? So very, very important. I think very, very empowering. And because I think many of us, we just don't know, like, oh, I'm getting sick. Oh, maybe I take some vitamin C, right? I try to rest a little bit. But so many of us have these herbal allies that are just right around us in our gardens or in our cabinets. And so if we can use them to initiate response. So we can call this an immune boosting tea or I'm getting sick tea. And what we want to do is we want to generate a sweat. We want a fever before we get made to fever in some ways, right? We want to activate the system. We want to stimulate the immune system. We want to basically just like, oh, something's trying to get into the territory, out. Here you go, like pushing it out. And so one of the major classes or categories of herbs that we're going to use are what are called diaphoretics. And these things are things that basically stimulate sweating, right? Many of you have probably like drunk a hot cup of peppermint tea and you're like, ooh, you notice like a little sweat on your brow. So you've experienced diaphoresis from an herb, right? And diaphoretics basically help kind of raise the body temperature, stimulate surface immunity, and basically, again, like help open the pores, right, to what we say, push that pathogen out. And so diaphoretics. So some of the diaphoretics that I brought here today, this is like sage leaf. So garden sage, this is Salve brandigii, but many of the California native sages like Salvia mellifera, even Salvia apiana, which is white sage, black sage, leucophylla, but just good old garden sage as well. If you have a jar of garden sage in your cabinet, you can utilize sage. So other herb I have, this is Tulsi. This is Vana Tulsi. It's a plant I actually got from Cami, one of the presenters from Kindred Herbs. And this is a really lovely, spicy, aromatic, anti-inflammatory, immune stimulating herb to add in. So you don't have to have all of these. I'm just kind of giving you a breadth, right? And trying to give you a sense of what you can kind of pull in. Many of you might have mint, for better or for worse, in your garden. And so any of the mints, spearmint, peppermint, dog mints, bergamot mints, whatever you have, the mints can be really helpful and useful. You cat owners might have attempted to grow catnip and then have it mulled over. But if you successfully have catnip in your yard, or you can raid your kitty's stash of it. So catnip's a really, really wonderful diaphoretic. It's a classic one for children's early stage colds because it also has some calming action to it. And so many of us, as we start feeling sick, we might get a little irascible, but definitely little ones do. I know mine have. So catnip, rosemary, it's a fantastic diaphoretic, wonderful anti-inflammatory. And just talking about anti-inflammatory, many of us think about trying to, remove ourselves from the discomfort of an early stage cold. And, we start getting a little achy, maybe we start even fevering. And so we think, oh, I'm going to take some aspirin or some ibuprofen. And in terms of herbal medicine, this is a very, very different approach, right? And what those things have the potential to do is actually suppress our immune action. And though they make us more comfortable, they can actually prolong the length of a cold or a flu if taken in the early stage. Right? So what we're looking to do is moderate fever, actually even instigate it before it comes, to rise up the body's temperature so it actually becomes more effective at fighting off pathogens and also inhibits viral replication, right, through that higher temperature. Viruses don't work as well at that higher temperature, and our immune system, certain facets of it can actually work better, right? So we want to get hot. So in a good way with our herbal friends. So rosemary. So wonderful diaphoretic. If you live in any part of California, you have gobs of rosemary. So use it. It's a wonderful, wonderful friend. So those of you just with culinary gardens, right, like oregano, I don't know how well you can see these, but hopefully you don't see this one too well. It's a little ratty. But oregano is also fantastic. You can also use things like thyme. This is, I think, like a savory, a winter savory. So most any of these kind of aromatic culinary herbs like sage, savory, thyme, oregano, marjoram, they all have high levels of essential oils. They all have some anti-inflammatory action, and they all have this ability to help stimulate diaphoresis. So another one I have here is lemon balm. This is Paula's favorite, who's going to be talking about the fire ciders. And so lemon balm is a lovely one that also is calming, but antiviral, diaphoretic, cooling in nature, and fantastic herb. Calendula is also one that we can use as well. And calendula has some immune stimulating properties. It's also considered a lymphatic, so it just helps activate the lymph and the immune system to help clear the pathogen. And so one can use the leaves or the flowers of that as well. So from the store, or if you live somewhere and you have a greenhouse and you can cultivate this, fresh ginger is fantastic. And fresh ginger is a really reliable diaphoretic, antiviral, anti-inflammatory. So fantastic herb to explore. And we're going to be making this. I'm going to be pulverizing this stuff together and showing you how to make this tea. And we'll talk about kind of dosages of things as well. In short, how much can you tolerate? Your mouth and your belly. So Cammie's going to be talking a bunch about these, but I'll include them in my tea too. So these are elderberries, and so they're a wonderful addition. They're not like diaphoretic. They're not going to stimulate this responsiveness so much, but they are antiviral, antioxidant, immune stimulating, and such as well. Ooh, one of my favorite plants. I wish you were all here today so I could feed you these little things. It's one of my favorite things to do in our classes. And so this is Spilanthes. Some people call it Echinacea of the tropics, Spilanthes olicera, or also toothache plant. It's a really fun plant to grow. And one of my favorite things to do with it, well, besides helping to kind of fend off colds and such, is to give it to unsuspecting friends and pop off these little flower buds and eat them. And it's also a sialagogue, and it's really actually very helpful. I've treated a number of patients with kind of clogged up sinus salivary glands or a dry mouth and makes difficulty swallowing. And so you can actually take a little nibble of one of these or a little squirt of tincture, and it'll stimulate saliva production. But it is also immunostimulant as well. And it's really fun to watch your friends just like drooling saliva all over the place. And but it's a joke that only lasts about like 5-10 minutes. So they eventually forgive you after that experience. So so I wish I could have done that to you all here today, but just virtually, just stimulate some saliva in your mouth to get an experience of it. So so spilanthes, so immune stimulating, not necessarily diaphoretic, but immune stimulating. Ooh, and how do I talk about early stages of colds and flus without talking about this wonder plant, yarrow? So this is Achillea millefolium, and the leaves and the flowers are used. I tend to prefer the native white yarrow rather than the beautiful colors like salmon and yellow ones. But if you have those and it's Achillea millefolium, then go ahead and try them out. But get some from the local native plant nursery or from Cammie's plant sales if you're local, and use the flowers on the tops. Really effective and wonderful diaphoretic, anti-inflammatory, antiviral, and wonderful stuff. So I had this popping up all over my garden, so I thought I'll bring this and add it in as well. And sorry, it's a little droopy, and it doesn't have its pretty orange flowers, but this is nasturtium. And nasturtiums, if any of you eat nasturtium flowers, but also the leaves, they're really hot, spicy, peppery. And so that, again, is that activating kind of sweat stimulating process. You don't have nasturtium, you can also use black pepper. And some traditions use black pepper for this kind of action of diaphoresis as well. Green onion might not taste so good in the tea, but really a very classic combination is fresh ginger and green onion made into a soup or a tea is a great kind of classic kitchen combo for early stages of colds to help promote that diaphoresis. So that's kind of the crew. Oh, I brought a little echinacea root. I think I have a little echinacea seed as well. So echinacea seed or flower heads or roots or leaves can all be used, right, for their immune stimulating action. So, so in general, when I'm feeling like, oh, I'm starting to get sick, what am I looking to do? I'm looking to inhibit viruses, right? So you could say the things like lemon balm, the elderberry, right, have some direct antiviral capacity. I'm thinking about stimulating my immune system. So I'm thinking about echinacea, elderberry, and spilanthes, and these sort of things that are known to like stimulate immune function, right? Like kind of quick response, natural killer cell immune function. And then I'm also thinking about the diaphoretics, right? These aromatic plants that really kind of open things up, these spicy warm or spicy cool, the things that help bring up that fever. So good. So you're all nodding, you're all clear so far on what's going on. Hopefully it's clear enough. And so if not, you'll have some opportunity to ask some questions later on in our time together. So good. So what I'm going to do is when we are using fresh plants, we need to bruise them up. We need to kind of brutalize them. Sorry, little friend catnip, but I need to basically mash and bruise the leaf tissue, right? So it releases its essence. So I can do this in my hands, or I can do this in a trusty blender. Look at this classical Osterizer blender that was brought here. They don't make them like they used to. So anyway, or Vitamixes are very helpful, but so you can put a bunch of these different herbs into a container. Ooh, I forgot one of my favorite herbs too. I'll mention that in a moment. Licorice. So let's talk about like dosage of these herbs. So, I'm getting sick. Okay, I'm gonna go out to my garden. I'm gonna go into my kitchen. I'm gonna get stuff, and I'm gonna use a sprig of this, right? A kind of small handful of this, right? And a bunch of this, and a tad of that. So in terms of making teas, you want to make a nice strong tea, and ideally you've befriended some of these things before you really need them, right? So it's kind of like, it's hard to call someone you just met and you're like going through crisis. And I'm like, I know I just met you last night, but I'm really going through a crisis. Can you help me? Right? So, it'll strain the relationship. So that new relationship. So ideally you've kind of played with and experiment with some of these herbs. You got to feel, how are they and how do they digest? And do you feel like a friend or not a friend to me? right? So make friends, make teas with some of these herbs from the garden, or get them at the local health food store or herb shop. And many of these you've probably actually ingested. So, because in some ways we want to give our body such a fighting chance, and we want to just like, I don't want to say inundate, but we want to flood it with goodness, right? And basically we want to drink as much as our digestive system and our flavor system are able to handle. And so small handfuls. Time? Been 20 minutes? Okay. So I should get this going fast then. Okay. So we're going to zip all these together. I'm going to throw some of this in, throw a little rosemary. And can I just finish this tea up? It's okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. So some oregano mint. A little bit of tangerine peel can be really nice, and it'll help the digestion as well. So it'll make it all a little bit more digestible. One herb I forgot to mention is licorice root. Licorice is antiviral, immune potentiating, and helps kind of buffer some of the dryness and strong flavor of the other herbs. So maybe like a tablespoon of licorice, a teaspoon and tablespoon. I'll throw a little echinacea in here. You're going to see lots of elderberry, so I'll skip the elderberry. And then some ginger, like a good chunk of ginger, that big, or even more. Sometimes I'll even pre-slice it a little bit, just so to make it easier for this tender little blender that's been around the block for 3 decades. So, all right. Let's have some fun with nasturtium leaf. And, a touch of calendula. Right, so I'm going to throw all these sort of things in. And, let's put some spilanthes in there. See if we can get a tongue-tingling tea. Okay. And so now I'm going to put a little bit of warm water in this tea. So here's my trusty kettle. And so just enough to kind of get it all mashed up. And then I'm going to attempt to blend it without splashing all over. And that's why it's better to do warm water than hot water. And let's see, trusty blender go. So this blending part you don't have to do for dried herbs, right? Because once you pour boiled water over the dried herbs, they are going to just release their essence. But the fresh herbs, you irrigate them and you don't see a pile of tea beneath them, right? So, so you're gonna pour that into your trusty jar, and then you're gonna pour boiled water over the tea. Right? And then cover it. Oh, because I can smell such goodness, such aroma, right? You're gonna cover it and let it steep for 15, 20 minutes, or basically until it's cool enough to drink, right? That beautiful color too. And so while that tea is steeping, you're gonna do something really important. You're gonna put on a hat or two, you're gonna put on a down jacket, you're gonna put on 2 pairs of socks, right? You maybe even like heat up a little bit of soup maybe that you have around after the tea. And so you're gonna bundle up, right? And then you're gonna drink this tea as hot as you can without burning yourself, right? You're gonna drink a good 8 to 16 ounces, 16 ounces even plus of this hot tea, and drink it. And then basically what you're looking for is to generate a sweat, right? And so you're gonna try to stimulate that sweat, drinking this nice warm tea. You can either follow it up with a little soup, and you'll be successful if you feel like, oh my goodness, I got a little sweat, right? And so let the sweat happen for a few minutes, let it all settle down, and then get yourself into kind of drier clothing and put yourself to bed. And then with the rest of the tea that you haven't drunk, then go ahead and keep sipping that throughout the day. You don't have to re-sweat yourself, but I always recommend people to stay kind of warm and balmy so that your chi, your energy, instead of trying to warm yourself, can basically just go into fending off your from this cold and this cold virus, whatever thing's happening. So good. So should I demonstrate straining it? You all know how to strain tea, and I've already run over my time, so I should probably not. But if there's any questions about that process or any of the herbs, feel free to, I think you can write them in, and then we'll all get a chance to answer them afterwards. All right.
Thank you very much, Darren. This is a little more information on places where you can get more information about Darren and what he does and how to find him. Apparently, there's some permaculture classes coming up with me and Paula that you should all look out for. And now we're going to talk to Ella. Hi, girl. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks so much. So I'm going to be talking about herbal salve. I prepared a little video of the process, but I'm going to talk about it here a little bit more. Really excited to share this with you. I love a salve. I have like a embarrassing collection of salves at home that I just can't resist a salve. So there are so many different uses and I just love them. So I'm super excited to talk to you about herbal salves today. I'm not a traditional herbalist, but I do love herbs and I love I love other people loving herbs too. So traditionally I'm a farmer and love growing herbs and all that. So that's a little bit about me. So we're going to be talking about herbal salves. Thankfully there's this PowerPoint presentation, so I'll just talk a little bit about what's on here. So some reasons so just one thing is that the tea that Darren just made smells really good. I'm really excited to hopefully get some of that. And so yeah, tea is one way to get herbal medicine inside your body. And one of the other awesome ways is to use an herbal salve. So it's a topical application. It's a way of getting all of that juicy herbal magic into your body, but not by imbibing it just through. So some of the things you might use this for is, I'm a farmer. I do a lot of, I have a lot of farmer friends, physical work. If you have a muscle rub or something like that, this is one application that is really helpful. So you could drink a tea that could help you out, but one of the things is just go right where the problem is. You have a sore muscle, rub some salve in there. It's also really helpful to promote relaxation. Like a really highly scented herbal salve can be really helpful to really get inside your skin. So there are all sorts of dermal layers that an herbal salve can penetrate. So yeah, so those are some of the reasons you'd use it. If you have a bruising or cuts and scrapes, it can be really nourishing to the skin. So one of my favorite herbs is calendula, and it really does a wonderful job of kind of like soothing the skin and kind of regenerating cell production in areas that might have an injury. For a muscle rub, you can use you can use a few different herbs in particular. Arnica is a really great herb that you can infuse oil into. Menthol herbs are really helpful. Think vapor rub when you were a kid and got sick. Like it really kind of like gets into your bloodstream through your nose, through your scent, through your like the dermal layers, the skin of your layers of your skin. So peppermint is a really good one. If you it's a very strong herb, so it gets through those layers very quickly. Eucalyptus is another really good one. Kind of opens your lungs and can really like penetrate quickly. Rosemary as well, that Darren talked about, is a really great one and luckily widely abundant in California. So it's a really great fresh herb here. Lavender as well is very helpful for skin cell replenishment. It helps regenerate skin cells more quickly. So it's just a really great kind of friend to us and to our skin. Comfrey root and comfrey leaf are really wonderful as well. They are such wonderful, big, juicy leaves and have such like a richness that they lend to herbal salves. Cinnamon is one that you have to be really careful with, but it can be really nice, especially for a muscle rub or achy bones. It will really kind of like warm up those muscles and kind of help you to like get your rejuvenation faster. Plantain is an awesome one as well. We use it when we have bee stings or something like that. It can kind of even like pull out toxins, things like that. Echinacea is a great one as well. And we love yarrow for skin and for bruising and for cuts and scrapes. Okay, the process. So what we're looking for is a kind of homogenized oil and beeswax mixture. So we start with infusing an oil, and you can do this in a passive way or an active way. I prefer the passive way because, I don't know, why not? Let the sun and the air and all, like, let time do the work. So the passive way of infusing oil is you would take dried herb and you'd mix it with an oil of your choice. And I like using olive oil, sesame oil, jojoba oil, coconut oil, sweet almond oil. There's a lot of really wonderful oils out there. And yeah, you put the dried herbs and then you leave them for like 2 weeks. You can leave them up to 6 weeks. Make sure you're using dried herbs. It's very important when you're infusing oil, because if you have water and oil and together, they can become rancid quickly. So you want to, if you're using fresh herbs, you want to toast them or dehydrate them a little bit before you add them to your oil. So you can do that passively, or you can do the active infusion method where you are actually cooking the oil on a low temperature, usually over a double boiler, and you have your fresh your dried herbs. Hopefully they're also kind of fresh, but they're dried herbs and they're in oil, and you're just cooking them. Make sure they're not getting too hot. And by the end, they should be kind of crispy. And if they're culinary herbs, they taste delicious. If you've had like brown butter and sage, it's delicious. So anyway, this is not an edible class, so disregard that for now, I guess. So strain out your herbs, and then your oil should have all the goodness in there. You will then, after you have your infused oil, you will then mix it with your beeswax. And yeah, I think that then you'll add essential oil towards the end. I love essential oils. I'm sure a lot of people do. They're so wonderful. They're little souls of the plants trapped in the glass, and they're just so wonderful. They smell so good. They're so powerful. I have great respect for the oil. So they will dissipate quickly, especially if they're heated. So if you are adding essential oil to your salve, add it very close to the end, right before you jar up. And the typical container that I like to use is like a dark glass. You can really use anything you have around. I love recycled, just ball jars or something like that. Just make sure that they're clean and there's no water in them before you pot them up, and keep them in a cool, dry place because they are oily and waxy and they will melt. So there's that. Wonder if there's more. What's the next? Okay. So let's go back to the other thing first. There are 2 things I want to mention before we play this video. And then I will, of course, answer questions at the end with the other panelists. But a couple things. Wax is very messy. I have for myself a wax kit. I talk about this a little bit in the video. Wax can clog up your pipes. It's all well and good while it's melted, but then it will, unmelt and harden. So I have a wax kit. I use a special grater for my beeswax. I don't do anything else with that besides waxy things. It can get really sticky. If anything you're using, make sure you wipe it down with a paper towel first. So that's an important thing. And I think that's it. I'm happy to answer more things later, but let's watch this video. And yeah, and I recorded this in my kitchen, and I don't know what the quality is like, but I did it with a lot of love. So here's hoping.
This is good.
I'm going to strain them right into some other oil that I have infused passively. So this oil, I'm using a combination of dried herbs and fresh herbs. The dried herbs I have here as lavender, rose petals, calendula, and comfrey root. And then the fresh herbs are comfrey leaf, rose geranium, and calendula. And those ones, the fresh herbs that I've used, I've toasted for just like about 5 minutes in a 170-degree oven. And yeah, you just want to get, you want to make sure that you're taking out all of the moisture that is in the herbs. So we're going to put our oil back in our pot. And add our beeswax. And this will take a little bit to melt, a minute or so. And wax. Wax is super massive. I myself have a wax kit over here. I keep all my waxy things in there. So I got this beeswax from the farmer's market. And what I do is I grate it. This is my special wax grater. I don't do anything else with this except for grate wax. This is really, wax will really clog up your pipes, so you don't want to let it go down your drain. So my wax kit, and I'm letting this over here melt. The herbs here, this comfrey is really wonderful for bruises, for sprains, for skin ailments, or muscle ailments rather. The oil that I'm using today, I'm using both the infused oil that we're infusing today and this is a passively infused oil. So what I've done is I put rose, calendula, and arnica in this jar and put olive oil in it, and it's just been slowly infusing over a series of weeks. And this here is similar. This is calendula and jojoba oil. So let our wax here infuse, melt into our oil. Wax is going to be our stabilizer. Talk a little bit more about this in the presentation, but our wax is almost melted. I'm using a double boiler. You want to prevent any sort of scalding that may occur. And here we have our wax all melted. So I'm going to pour these into these glass containers. These containers were given to me. I would typically prefer an amber, much like these ones, because it just protects a little bit more from the elements. But the glass ones here, I mean, they're a gift and they're wonderful. So you use these ones. Here we have it. Here's our herbal salve. So it's a pretty simple process. Just keep in mind a couple things that we talked about today, and good luck. Happy making.
That was lovely. Thank you. I'm having trouble getting out of this. I'm having trouble getting out of my YouTube full screen mode here.
Hi, I'm Ella Fleming. Today we're going to learn how to make an herbal salve.
No, we're not, Ella. Stop it. There we go. All righty.
Hi, I'm Ella Fleming. Today we're going to learn how to make an
There we go. All right, this is how you can reach Ella. That's Smella Fresh on Instagram. And she also is the garden manager at the Homeless Garden Project. I think I am still on optimize for video. There, now I can see you guys. All righty, now we're going to talk to Cami or Cameron Salomon. Kindred Herbs is her business. She grows plants and I think she sells product as well. And she's going to make an elderberry syrup today. Thank you. You're muted, my dear.
Hey folks, so good to be with you on this herbal format, Zoom format. These presentations have been so inspiring, and the aromas from the tea, and you can't really see the salve that Ella made, but it's beautiful. You just want to slap it on your skin. It's so nice. So happy to be with you guys here today. I have been doing some herbal growing and farming over the last 18 years or so, just kind of specializing more and learning about growing herbs in the last 8 years. And I started this small local organic nursery growing and specializing in medicinal plants. So it's been a big learning journey, and I would say I'm just, it's one of those things that's a whole lifetime of learning, trial and error, and just the joy and pleasure of interacting and working with the herbs and learning from every time I listen to a salve intro to salve making or intro to tea making. I always learn new things. So repetition is key when it comes to this kind of stuff, and thinking with the child's mind and what can you learn new about something you've already experienced before is really great. So happy to be here, even just to listen to the presenters from before. But so I'm really excited to talk about elderberry. It's an amazing plant, and the elder tree grows all over the world, and in Europe and in America, primarily North and Central America, and I don't know, I was reading about elder also being used in Asia, so I don't know if there's any growing in the Asian continent, but I think so. And so it's a very common herb that's been used throughout centuries by people, and the whole plant is useful and has been used for a bunch of different things. So it's a really great plant to get to know. And today I'm going to be talking about 3 kinds of elders. They all have the same genus, which is Sambucus, but then they have separate and different species names. So I'll be going over that as I talk about it. It can be a little bit confusing, and plants in general are kind of getting renamed. So sometimes it's like, oh, I thought that's what that species name was, but oh, now it's this one. And so but there's another way of kind of identifying elders that's a little bit easier, which is by the color of the berry. So I'm going to be referring to that as well. So I'm going to do a demo about making elderberry syrup, which is a really fun and easy way of consuming elderberry. As you know, it's the berry that we're using, but you can also use the flower for medicine making. And I'll talk about that as well. So the syrup is, we're just basically doing a decoction, which is like a slow, it's a gentle kind of simmering of an herb, a part of an herb. Generally, it's like the bark or root. In this case, it's a berry. And then we'll just be adding honey. So it's super easy. It's very, fun to just play with different recipes. People keep it really simple and just do the berries and honey, or you can kind of spice it up with chai herbs like cardamom or cinnamon, or and then you can also add like medicinal mushrooms like reishi and turkey tails. And then you can also go with Chinese tonic herbs, which I really love to do, and add roots and such like Codonopsis and Astragalus and Poria. So you can get as advanced as you want with adding a ton of different food and tonic herbs. And you can also just keep it really simple. Sometimes it's nice to make simple syrup for, kids who tend to not like as complicated things, or some adults tend, so you can just, flavor it to who you're serving and cater it to who you're serving. And then as well as like, if there's any special medicinal actions or qualities you're wanting to infuse the syrup with. So it could be like targeted, more for the respiratory, or, super immune, or, stuff like that. When I say tonic herbs, I'm referring to like food, like herbs that you can take similarly like food. So they're kind of safe to use, like, in a long way. Elderberry is considered and classified kind of as a food herb, which, if people have, ever tried elderberry wine, or elderberry preserves, or elderberry pie, or whatever, it is an herb that gets incorporated like a food. So, the Chinese tonic herbs are oftentimes herbs that get used for making broth. So they're safe to consume. The chai herbs are considered food herbs. So those are also, safe to consume in a regular way. So that's important to be thinking about. Medicinal mushrooms are often also herbs that are safe to take in a regular basis. So that's one of the great things about elderberry. And today I'm going to be using dried berries. You can also use fresh berries. And, dried berries are great, to use like in, you can order, or, you can dry your own berries, or you can buy dried berries, and that allows you to make elderberry syrup any time of the year. And, there's a little bit of a difference in, how to use them and what you can do with them. Obviously with fresh berries, you can, there's a different type of vibrancy to the syrup and the color and the experience. Harvesting your own berries is a beautiful thing to do. And, for those of us that are on the West Coast, we can harvest the blue elderberry, which is the Sambucus caerulea, which you can see a photo of on the right on this slide. That's the blue elderberry. So that's a really fun experience. I haven't tried making a juice yet, but that's another way of using the blue elderberry and the fresh berries. And so I can talk a little bit about, and then dried berries, like I said, you can use them any time of the year. And, the considerations are just the ratios of your recipe for what you're, making. Fresh berries already have some water content, so you don't need to use as much water, whereas dried berries have, lost their water, and so you would use a different ratio and more water for a syrup. And then also with the dried berries, it's nice to pre-soak them before you heat them up. And then growing elderberry. So I have a lot to say about growing elderberry, but because it's something that I've been learning a lot about, but I'll just kind of keep it to the basics. Elderberry is a great plant to have in the garden. Elderberry for every farm or household. You only really need one elderberry tree to get a lot of material for making, syrups and whatnot, for a family. But they're fantastic kind of edge plants, growing on the edge of someone's, garden, or on the edge of someone's farm. And there's a big kind of excitement right now in the agricultural scene around growing productive hedgerows of blue elderberry, which is our native West Coast elderberry, as a way of creating a windbreak, or as a way of having a more permanent habitat zone for pollinators. So if you wanted to go to the slide before us. So elderberry is a super forgiving plant. It's really easy. It has its preferences, but it's also like very generous in that, you know, it will grow in a bunch of different kinds of conditions. When you see it growing in the wild, it's often on riparian corridors, and that tells you something about what the plant likes. So it does like water, it does like nutrients. It likes occasional flooding, or like we like to say, wet feet, which is when the roots are down into the soil. So it doesn't want to be doesn't want to have its feet wet all the time, but it likes occasional wet feet. So, you know, as the rivers or whatever rise and fall, it gets like, you know, more or less water. Also the sediment deposition, so it likes the organic material. The blue elderberry can also grow in dryland conditions, and you oftentimes see it like on the edge of a road. It seems to prefer or like disturbed soil, and can tolerate dry conditions. So that's one of the great things about planting the Sambucus caerulea or the blue elderberry, is that it doesn't require as much nutrients or water as the American elder, which is I would say that so there's the black elderberry from Europe, and that's what I actually have here is the black elderberry. And most of the products that you find in like now in like CVS, because elderberry is made it into CVS, but the black elderberry is from Europe, and it's got darker berries. And then we've got the West Coast Sambucus caerulea, which has blueberries. And then there's the American elderberry, which grows like more in the Midwest area. And that's got a purple berry, so I'm calling it the Perps. And so that's those varieties of the purple elderberry, of the Sambucus canadensis, is more like there's a cultivated variety which is grown and has more productive commercial value around like even fruit ripening and shorter, like, you know, more consistent harvesting windows. So those are important considerations for commercial production. But the blue elderberry is also really great for intercropping with the American elder. And then people do plant the European black elderberry as well. So, you know, why not have one of each? But so yeah, so that's really exciting. It can grow anywhere between 8 to 20 feet tall. It's a shrub or a tree. Some people will coppice it and cut it all the way back, and it sends up new shoots. And then it can get kind of bushy, or like you can sometimes see them like prune super nicely, and they're a beautiful tree. They're really quite striking, and they make beautiful white flowers, umbel flowers that you see like the end of spring, early summer. So if you're like driving down Highway 101 and you see along the roadside all these like beautiful flowers, that's the elderberry. And the flowers are medicinal. It's a diaphoretic, so great, you know, for sweating, for cold and flus. And so it does like full sun, but it also tolerates partial shade. You can harvest the fruit or the flowers in the early summer, but what do flowers become? They become fruit. So you just want to be thoughtful about how much flowers you harvest, because if you do want berries, that's a consideration. Also, I always like to think, because elderberry is a pollinator species, that lots of birds and bees and butterflies, and maybe not butterflies, but you know, other flying critters and whatnot like to consume. I always like to leave some for the wildlife. Yeah, so you harvest the berries in the late summer into the fall. There's oftentimes a 6 to 8 week harvesting window, and then when you harvest, you can process them right away to make this syrup, which are super quick, and or you can like freeze them or dry them, and yeah. So the elderberry syrup, let's pretend that the stove is on, so we're going to Hollywood it, but for safety reasons, we're not going to light it. I pre-soaked these berries a couple hours before I got here. There's 1 cup of berries to 4 cups of water. The recipe is in the slideshow, and there's also a link to it in the back of my little section. I got this recipe from this current edition of Mother Earth News. It's all about herbs, and there's a small little section with a recipe from Rosemary Gladstar about elderberry syrup. So the syrup is really fun and easy to make. Basically just pour the decoction is, you just like gently simmer this material for, I don't know, anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes. You don't have to like overdo it. And then, you want to let it, I basically kind of eyeball it. So like if my water is up to here, I just wait till it's like halfway or so, a little bit, almost halfway less. And then I kind of know I've done a good amount of simmering, and then I take an immersion blender and then just like blend it all up. And I use a strainer. And then I just like super easy, just kind of dump this material into the second pot. And then I will, use a spoon, because this is normally all masticated or whatever the word is. And you just use a spoon to get out any of the remaining liquid, or, take a break, walk away, it drains. And then after that, if you want to get kind of fun and creative, and you want to add other herbs at this time, you can put your other herbs in and let that kind of cook. You want to add a little bit more water, because you're going to decoct those herbs as well. And then that will, for another 15, 20 minutes. One consideration is I prefer to use like solid version. I don't like to use powders when I make the syrup, because they're really hard to strain out and then they get at the bottom. So if I'm going to use cinnamon, I use cinnamon chips. If I'm going to use cardamom, I use cardamom pods. And then I use the, pieces of the other Chinese herbs or slices of ginger or whatnot. And then if you decide to do that, then you strain that out. And then at the very end, once all your herbs are out of the water, then you just add, for this recipe, 1 cup of honey. I like to use local raw honey. And today I chose star thistle honey, so I thought I'd make it a little extra medicinal. And so then once that's done, you want to put it into a container of your choosing. I just tend to reuse mason jars. I'm pretty simple. I just make this syrup for my friends and family right now. Hopefully in the future, I'll be making it in a commercial way. But I put labeling is super important. So you just basically want to make sure you've got the ingredients and the date. That's like, so honey, elderberries, other herbs, love, and then today's date. And there you go. You can, people, they say, or whatever, about 2 months in the refrigerator is a good shelf life for this. Some people like to add a little bit of alcohol to help preserve it. The honey does 2 functions. It acts as a preservative, but then it also is a medicine unto itself. So that's really great. You can use it. How do you use it? What's the dosage? There's some information in the handout of the slideshow. But You can use it every day to help boost, keep your immune system strong. And then if you do get sick with initial onset and Darren's tea and rubbing of the salve, you can take elderberry syrup, every few hours, like up to a tablespoon. Just kind of go for it until your symptoms dissipate. And yeah, with kids, you use less. And pretty much anybody can use elderberry syrup unless you're allergic to the ingredients, but the children can use it, mothers can use it, and the elderly can use it. It's a food medicine, so it's really great that way. It's a very strong antiviral, anti-catarrh, helps with the respiratory system, expectorating. It's anti-inflammatory. It's got tons of vitamins in it. It's like a superfruit. It's like higher than acai with the amount of vitamin C. So it's pretty amazing. We're pretty lucky to have it. It's a great holiday gift. And yeah, so thank you so much. And happy herbal making, guys. That's too long.
Thank you, Cameron. That was way more information than I thought I would ever know about those herbs. That's great. Let me share again. So we're at a point I'd like to take a vote. The next section is Paula. Paula is not here. And I'm wondering if the audience, and if you just put it in the chat, would you prefer to video on fire cider at this point, or shall we start the discussion panel and do the fire cider video at the end? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to say in the chat which you would prefer. Chat's coming up. Either way, fire cider now. Let's chat with a lot of people. Send a link to the video, watch it later, fire cider. Oh man, we're pretty split here. Darren, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, you bet.
If there are questions about the fire cider, can you answer them? Okay, then I think we'll watch the fire cider video and then we'll do what we're going to do. All right, so you guys hang out again. We're here at the UCSC Hay Barn and we have strong protocols around COVID. So as the panel is going to sit side by side, they will put on their masks. I've got a slide up here of places and resources that Cammie gave us to more and find her and look for her plant sales, which are pretty awesome. Happen a couple times a year. Alrighty, so Paula Grainger, the English herbalist. She's kind of famous in Santa Cruz, like all these folks are, and she couldn't be here tonight, but she's written several books. She has a herbalist practice, and she teaches classes. And she and Darren are going to be both teaching for the permaculture group sometime later this year, but they don't have dates yet, but look for that. So I'm just going to launch into her fire cider video, and let's do that.
Hello, I'm Paula Grainger, sometimes known as the English herbalist in Santa Cruz, for obvious reasons. And today I'm going to show you how to make a fire cider. Fire cider is a preparation of vinegar, apple cider vinegar in this instance, as you can tell from the name, which is infused with a number of different herbs and spices to create a fiery, hot, knock your socks off, delicious infused vinegar that you can use throughout the winter time. It's traditionally done at this time of year in the fall, so that you've got it going through those cold winter months to bring some heat and some fire into your constitution. And traditionally that's seen as boosting your
I'm sorry, I don't know.
That's seen as boosting your immune system and also giving you a greater level of warmth in the body, which can protect against winter colds and viruses and so forth. So as I said, it's a traditional thing done in the fall. Fire cider was popularised, it's very, very old and traditional idea, but it was popularised by a herbalist called Rosemary Gladstar, who's very well known, and this recipe is sort of based on her somewhat. As I say, this has been done for a very long time. Different vinegars would have been infused with these kind of hot winter herbs, particularly in Northern Europe, and that's why I think apple cider vinegar is particularly appropriate, because there wouldn't really have been grapes in Northern Europe to get you through those cold winter months. And I think we're going to have a bit of a winter this year, so I'm going to be making lots of this. So what are we going to use? So we'll start with our vinegar, and as I said, I like apple cider vinegar. It's got its own medicinal qualities. It is it's high in kind of good bacteria. It's a fermented product, naturally fermented, or should be if you get the right one. It also has an ability, a lot of people find it can kind of balance acidity in their digestive system, surprisingly, and support good digestion, also help you to metabolize your food, and it can help with kind of achy joints and things as well. So I like this one, which is Bragg, but whichever one you get, just make sure it has this with the mother, or raw, unfiltered, live. This is living. It's got that, if you can, you probably can't see, but there's a murkiness in the bottom. That's actually the fermented, the mother, the kind of fermenting body, like a kombucha, SCOBY or something like that in the bottom there. So I've got a bottle of that size, which is 32 ounces. I'm going to do this in a quart jar. It won't fill it all the way up, but it's nice to have a bit of space in there. But you can obviously fit this according to how much you think you're going to want. And it's one of those recipes where you really don't need to be particularly precious about quantities. Put what you've got in there, make it according to your own taste as well, in terms of quite how fiery and what it is, and who's going to be taking it. So I've got the basic ingredients here that I like to use, many of which are very traditional to go in it. First one is ginger. Love ginger. This is kind of a hand of ginger, and I'll use about this much. Don't bother to peel it, I'll just grate it and in it will go. Ginger obviously is fiery, pungent, heating. It brings that warmth to the body. It's kind of central heating. It brings heat into the center of the body. So it's a really nice sort of warming herb. And it also is very supportive of the digestive system. You know, and if you think about it, a lot of your immunity is to do with the function of your digestion. So anything that helps support that is really useful. So I've got a lovely hand of ginger, and I should say everything I use is organic. I wouldn't use non-organic, and if I was forced to, I would then peel it, because you don't know what's on the surface. But you know, this is pretty thin-skinned, and I'm going to strain it out anyway, so I'm comfortable with that. I will need to peel this. This is garlic. Garlic, you know, it frightens away vampires. It's got this ability to boost the immune system, and it's highly antimicrobial. There's lots of recipes that involve garlic for kind of winter cold and flu protection, including infused honey with garlic in it. You just chop garlic cloves and put them in honey, and it kind of all smooches down over time, and you can just take spoonfuls of the honey. Using it raw because it has more power in its raw state. I'm not going to use the whole clove. You could, but I personally don't want to walk around, you know, knocking people over as I go. So I probably use about 4 or 5 cloves of that, just crushed and finely chopped. Chili peppers, lots of different ones around. Different ones have different levels of heat. This one was called a Fresno pepper when I bought it. I don't know how spicy it is, so I'll have a little tiny taste before it goes in. I'll probably use one of these without the seeds. But again, it's entirely up to you, just chop it up finely. And chili, of course, is very heating, very antimicrobial as well. Again, it kind of kills bugs, as it were, and brings that central heat to the body. If you are very sensitive to chilies, you could just use a tiny bit. You could also use dried chili powder if you prefer as well. I like the fresh. So the ginger and the peppers, pretty exotic, hot country type herbs. This is something much more traditional from where I'm from. This is horseradish. You can buy it raw in this state. It's certainly in New Leaf right now, in Whole Foods. I've seen it in Shoppers. It's all over the place. And you're more familiar with this probably in your cocktail sauce that you have with seafood. And you'll know it's got that very distinctive, very pungent, very spicy taste. And really from Northern Europe, this is the equivalent of those more spicy things from the warmer climes. Back where I'm from, you know, in the dim and distant past, when no one was shipping ginger or chilies into the country, horseradish was the thing to bring that heat into winter food. And, you know, my grandmother would always serve it with roast beef and things like that, where you've got that kind of quite fatty, quite heavy, you know, protein-rich food, and it kind of cuts through that and gives you some kind of support for the digestion again in that way that hot, pungent, spicy things do. I'm not going to put the whole lot in there. I'll probably put about, well, maybe about 2/3 of that bit that's there, something like that. Again, I could do a bit more if I wanted to. I'm a little bit sensitive to things that are really hot and spicy, so I just keep it not too hot for me, but do it how you want to do it. And again, we're going to grate that, and you don't need to peel it. I'm going to break this in half so you can see it. Hold on. Oh, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Turmeric. You all know this herb, I'm sure you probably know that it's anti-inflammatory, that it's used to help with kind of rheumatic joints, arthritis, and things like that, and just as a general anti-inflammatory in the body. And a bit of an immune booster too. I would argue it's got that kind of immune boosting quality. You can use this, you could just put a couple of teaspoons of turmeric powder from the store, but again, this is pretty easily available, and I love it in its fresh form. Be careful, it stains like crazy. I've got a white worktop here. If I kind of grated some and spilled it on there, I would have a big yellow stain. Likewise with my clothes. So just be a little bit aware of that when you're working with it. And once you've strained out the fire cider as well. I'm going to put that little root. It's technically not a root, but they call it a root, so I'm going to use that much of it. Onion. Loads of tradition again around using onions as a booster for the immune system and to fight off colds and flu. There's a very old traditional remedy in England where you chop up an onion and put it inside your socks to ward off a cold. Again, that idea of heating the body. I'll use about half an onion, just peeled, chopped, fairly small, and stuck into my jar as well. Again, you can make an onion honey just by chopping the onion up and soaking it in honey, and it will again soften, and you can have spoonfuls of that on its own or stirred into hot water, and you could add honey, lemon, ginger, whatever. But one of the beauties about the fire cider is it's very easy to use. You could obviously put it onto salad dressings. The way I like to use it is just a teaspoon or two in some hot water first thing in the morning, and I really find that wakes me up for the day, and there's a lot of benefits to taking apple cider vinegar first thing in the morning. And when you add in all these fabulous herbs, then you've really got something that's a great start to your day. One more ingredient I'm adding, and that is elderberry. I'm sure you may have heard, if you've got an interest in herbs and things, about the antiviral benefits of elderberry. There's a lot of research that supports that idea. I love elderberries. A bit later in the season for them to be fresh, and we don't get a lot of them growing around here anyway because it's a bit dry. They like to be in a wetter climate, really. But these are dried elderberries, and I'm going to put 2 tablespoons full of those in there as well, just to give it that little antiviral boost. So my last ingredient is honey. Now, I personally don't bother to do this for the most part, but traditionally what is done is once you've finished your fire cider, and I'll tell you how to do that in a moment, you gently warm it and you add in some honey to taste. Obviously it makes it sweeter. It kind of actually makes what we call an oxymel, which is the vinegar, and mel, which is the honey. A combination of honey and vinegar, which is a very traditional way of preparing herbs. Honey has its own medicinal uses, of course. You know, it's very soothing to the throat. It's highly antimicrobial again. It can help prevent against seasonal allergies. And this one was actually from some friends of mine literally just down the road. So very, very local honey indeed. So yeah, if you want to at the end, once you've strained it out, you can warm it a little bit and then stir in some honey. Don't warm it too much because a lot of these pungent oils in these herbs and spices can be lost if you overheat it. So just a very gentle warming is how you would do that. So there's my ingredients. I'm not going to bore you by having you sit there and watch me grating them. But yeah, I'm going to chop the onion. I'm going to grate one piece of the turmeric. I'm going to grate about 2/3 of this piece of horseradish. I'm going to chop, discard the seeds, and finally chop this chili pepper, 5 cloves of garlic, crushed and chopped, peeled, crushed and chopped. And I'm probably going to go for the whole hand of ginger because I love ginger and I think it's just the most wonderful immune booster and herb to just get everything going on a cold winter's day. And then I've got 2 tablespoons full of my elderberries and a good old bottle of apple cider vinegar. So yes, by the magic of video, I'm going to move that out of the way and show you what I prepared yesterday. So all I did here was chop up the herbs and spices as described, and then pour my apple cider vinegar over. And once I've done that, lid on tightly and just give it an inversion like that. If you'd seen this when I did this, and I did this yesterday afternoon because I actually tried to make the video again and my phone went strange, you would have seen that everything, a lot of it was kind of floating up the top here. And that's because things like the dried elderberries were dry. So they were floating, but overnight they've absorbed a lot of the apple cider vinegar and they're starting to sink down. But it is really important you don't have stuff sticking out the top. I've got a kind of gap in the middle here. I've got the heavy stuff at the bottom, lighter stuff floating around in the top here. I'm gonna just keep inverting it like that, as long as you don't want bits of stuff sticking out the top because otherwise it's gonna go off. What I'm gonna do with this now, it's gonna go and sit somewhere warm. Not hot, I'm not talking like right over a heater, but just somewhere kind of a decent room temperature for about a month. You could do it for less time if you want to, but traditionally again it's done for a month, and that means you'll be kind of bottling this up over the holiday season, and it makes a lovely gift as well for people, which is one of the things we're talking about today. So I'll label it, because I label everything, and you think you'll remember what things are and you won't. So I'll label it, leave it for a month, every day, and I'll put it somewhere where I walk past it a lot, because that way every time I go past I'll just, I'm not shaking it, I'm just giving it a gentle inversion, just to mix everything up and to help it macerate more effectively. After a month, I'm going to get a large measuring cup. You could use any bowl or whatever you've got, but wide-mouthed, and a sieve, a couple of layers of cheesecloth, or personally I like to use a nut milk bag because they've got a really fine mesh and they're not absorbent, so they don't actually kind of suck up too much of the liquid on the way. Strain it through, give that a good old squeeze with clean hands to get as much of it as I can out. Then everything in here will go on the compost, or compost, and I will have my apple cider vinegar. It's important to strain it well because it will keep much better if it hasn't got leftover organic material in it. And with that, I'm going to bottle it up. I can store it in the refrigerator if I want it to keep for a really long time, but as long as it's well strained, it keeps pretty well not in the refrigerator, and you just kind of use it up this winter, which you will. Bottle it, and at that point it's better to store it in a cool, dark place if possible, because that will make it preserve for longer. And in terms of dosage, as I say, I prefer a teaspoon a day. I know people who will have a little shot glass of it. Personally, I find that's a little bit much. Also, bear in mind it's vinegar, so like fruit juice, for example, it's highly acidic, so it's not great for your teeth if you're not careful. So the way to get around that is to have your little bit of apple cider vinegar. Mine is in a cup of hot water. So apple cider vinegar, hot water, slice of lemon if you want to be fancy, and just drink that every morning. But if you want to, either way, really, to protect your teeth, what I remember that acid will slightly weaken the enamel temporarily. So you don't want to take that and then immediately brush your teeth, because that can damage the enamel. So give it a half hour or so, a little bit of rinse with some water, and then brush away, or brush your teeth half an hour or so beforehand. And you can just, as I say, have that to last you through the winter and hopefully give you a boost. And if you feel like you're going down with something, you can have more doses. So you could have maybe 3 or 4 doses in a day of a similar size. just to try and fight off any colds and flu, because I'm a great believer that heating up the body helps your body to fight off viruses. They can only survive at certain temperatures in the body, so if you heat yourself up, take a hot shower or a hot bath or whatever, have some of this stuff with hot water and really get a little sweat going, and that can really help. Of course, if you are pregnant or nursing, or it's a child, or you are taking any medication, then you should talk to a herbalist or to your doctor first, or another medical professional. So yeah, I really hope you'll have a go at making some fire cider this winter. It's a real joy to make. As you've just seen, it's super simple. You can customize it according to how you want it to taste and make it unique to you. And it makes a really great holiday gift to help keep your friends and family healthy and well through the winter. Thanks.
All right, well, that was the very interesting piece on fire cider. This to me again. There you go. So here's where we learn more about Paula. And, and with that, I'm hoping we have more questions. We are going to pull our panel together for a panel chat. Let me stop video. De-optimizing for video. Going to stop sharing. And here is our panel. Very good. And we have a couple of questions that have come in, but it hasn't been too many.
Before we do one question, can I just finish this process real fast?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So we had our tea. We've already slurped a bunch of it. You're straining it out, la-di-da-da-da, right? But you can see it's not your normal cup of tea, right? You can't see through this, right? So it's rich and full of phytonutrients. And then again, you're gonna put on your hat, put on your jacket, get all cozied up, and drink your tea. Drink it as hot as possible, chug it on down. We all thought it actually tasted really good.
Yeah.
And then get your sweat on, and then change once you've got your sweat on, and rest. Beautiful. And
is the purpose of sweating like having a fever?
Yeah, so it's basically mimicking a fevering process. And when we're overheated, our immune system works better at combating viruses, and it's a less hospitable environment for viruses to replicate in. So there's even thoughts that, after going out places and you feel like you've been exposed, you can even do like really warm nasal rinses. Some people even add herbs or xylitol into those nasal rinses, those saline nasal rinses, but along with herbs, to help wash out any viruses that are trying to attach to those mucosal membrane surfaces, right, in the nose. You can do gargles in the throat, and you can gargle this as you can even strain it out a little bit better, put some salt in it, and snort it up your nose as well.
Oh, good.
Not so fun, huh? So it really to actually help combat that early stage as well as these sinus rinses with herbal teas. Right, but always put the salt in, otherwise it just feels horrible. Okay, let's look at some audience questions.
Somebody wants to know where we can get spilantes, that flower that makes you drool. It's very tingly on your tongue.
So Cami probably sells it at plant sales. It's an annual, it's a kind of tender annual. Maybe it's perennial in Hawaii and tropical places, but so I grow it every year, and I get seeds or plants, strictly medicinals. We'll have seeds for it. I've seen Seeds of Change or whatever has seeds as well. Sometimes, or specialist nurseries like Cami's Kindred Herbs will have plants. And then, and then I often grow it. If you live in a really warm area, you can plant it in the ground. It'll get kind of big enough and tall enough that it'll be kind of easy to harvest. In more coastal California, I grow it in a pot, so it gets a little bit like a nice, kind of wide pot. And so I think it helps the soil warm up a little bit more, and it just makes it easier to harvest and keep clean. Also, when my kid was really young, my littlest, he would eat all those Spilanthes buds as they came up, and so he'd eat like 5 at a time. And so I had to put it up on my greenhouse shelf to keep it out of his view. And so he would eat 5 and then feed 1 to someone and just watch them tear up. And so that was also part of the fun.
And then if it's in a pot, you can possibly overwinter it.
I haven't had much success overwintering, but maybe in a greenhouse.
In a greenhouse, it's work.
You've worked it? Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, we have a question for Ella. Ratio of herbs to oil.
Oh, great question. Well, I guess it kind of just depends how juicy you want it. This one, I mean, you can see it's about like a quarter. So 1 cup of, I guess 1 to 4 is usually good. So 1 cup of herbs to 4 cups of oil is usually a good ratio. It depends how infused and how potent you want your infused oil to be. But I'd say 4 to 1 is a pretty good ratio, or 1 to 4. However you're doing that math, 1 cup of herbs to 4 cups of oil.
Got it. And is it possible to infuse multiple herbs in a single jar or a single passively?
Yeah, you can have your favorites. I had another oil that was rose, arnica, and calendula all in the same jar. You can do it if you know that that's what you like. It's also have multiple oils so you can do different blends. But I think it's great if you already know exactly what kind of salve you want. It's a great way to do it.
And then along the same lines, ratio of oil to beeswax.
Yes, I love that question. I am sorry that I didn't mention that. Similarly, it's 1 to 4. So if you have 1 cup of oil, you'll need a 1/4 cup of beeswax. That is for a kind of that's the one I like. Some people actually use 1/3 of a cup, so 1 to 1/3. That's if you want a stiffer, more room temp, more stable. That's one that you don't mind kind of like warming up with your hand a little bit more. And then also what you can do is if you use a 1/4 cup of wax to 1 cup oil, you can do 1 tablespoon of a butter, like cocoa butter or shea butter. So that's kind of your recipe there. But thank you, great question, please.
For the people who like weights, I'll tend to think about like 17 to 20% beeswax to oil. Right, so weight to volume, right? So if you have 10 ounces of oil, you might use 10 ounces of oil. Oh my goodness, doing math. It would be 1.7 ounces. No, it'd be 3.4 ounces would be 20% of beeswax, right? And another thing, I don't know if you mentioned this, but basically doing tester spoons.
Yeah.
You mentioned that.
Oh, I didn't mention it, but please mention it.
So a really nice way to see is because when your beeswax is all melted in the oil, it's very difficult to know if you like how tacky is it because it's all liquid. And so if you dip a spoon in and put it in the refrigerator or the freezer, right, on a little piece of wax paper or paper towel or on a plate that you'll have to clean later and not get the wax stains drained. And then let it cool, and then you'll be able to see how tacky, how hard is it. So yeah, that's a really helpful little technique that you can see.
Cold spoons.
Great. Okay. So somebody mentioned that for vegans, if they're not comfortable using honey, they can use date syrup in the elderberry fixins. Wondered if you've ever done that.
I haven't, but I'm sure there's lots of great alternatives. Another preservative would be to just add like vitamin C or alcohol.
Or sugar. Oh, God, I didn't say that word. But the sugar was a very traditional preservative for syrups, right?
Okay.
So even, just doing half sugar, half tea.
Totally.
Right.
Maple syrup?
Could you do maple syrup?
Yeah, I think you could. It's waterier, so you have to just account for moisture levels, but it's great. It's tree on tree.
My hunch is you need more than half maple syrup.
Yeah.
With like with the
Really liquids.
with the elderberry tea, and then the honey, you could do half and half.
Yeah.
But I think it would go off a little quicker with the maple syrup, so you have to increase that sugar, right? The amount of maple syrup in there.
Definitely. Maybe maple sugar
Mm-hmm.
instead of the syrup, or in addition to the syrup, something like that.
Yeah, or you can avoid it and just make tea. So no, the syrup's yummy too.
Do you guys ever freeze the elderberry stuff? Does it change?
I mean, that's a great. Cammy was asking about freezing. I think that's a great idea, and one can make teas and then freeze them. One can make these syrup cubes and freeze them. And freezing is a really great way to preserve and tends not to damage constituents and such. So, so if you feel like this is just too complex a tea process, make it when you have lots of time, and then freeze it in nice cube trays, right? And then pop them out, melt it, right, and then drink it warm. So, but yeah, freezing is a great way to preserve things that want to go off, right, for nice stabilizing.
Brilliant. So somebody wanted to know if elderberry needs to be cooked because they've heard that it was a toxin raw.
Oh, so I guess it's the seeds that have cyanide. It's the cyanide. There in the seeds, there's cyanide like constituents as well as them. So it's that's why it's important to strain it. Or if you juice it, you have a mesh process that it goes through. So the juice is fine, and I guess you want to cook it just a little bit, so not raw, but you remove the stems, you remove the seeds, and then you want to cook it for. You don't need to cook it for very long. I guess like even 10 minutes can remove it. So.
Yeah, many people actually feel like they get nauseated by eating raw elderberries, like right off the tree. And if you eat too many of them, it can be, kind of nauseating. I think it's because of some of those constituents. So like Amy was saying, just that cooking process helps convert it or deactivate it, right?
So the person that mentioned the date syrup is suggesting the most blood building and more warming than maple is jujube.
Oh,
Date syrup.
Harder to get, but that sounds
Jujube
great.
syrup, wow.
Sounds beautiful.
Easy now to get fresh organic jujube dates with which to make the syrup. So it's a DIY jujube syrup day. And combined with elderberry and other temperate climate origin herbs, it's climatically suitable combo. And in wide use in traditional Chinese medicine. So there you go.
Great.
Well, we have some experts in the audience as well as on the panel here. Okay. Do you have anything, Vanessa, on the Q&A panel?
Let's see. We have everything. Oh, someone asked if you can use fresh herbs when doing a salve.
If you are going to use fresh herbs, yes, you can, but you do need to remove the moisture first. So I would just put them on a dehydration tray if you have a dehydrator until they're just, or put them on the lowest setting. My oven only goes 170, and put them on there. Definitely watch for burning, and just basically toast them until they've released most of their steam and moisture and stuff. You do want to avoid fresh herbs just simply because water in the oil will eventually create rancidity. One thing you can do if you are concerned about rancidity is you can add either essential oil of grapefruit or of tea tree oil. Honestly, most essential oils contain antimicrobial properties, which can serve your salve for longer. But one of the best things to do to get out ahead of it is remove as much moisture from those fresh herbs as possible. But it's great to use I think growing herbs is the best way to get them. So definitely, if you've grown them, please use them. I dehydrate stuff all season long. So I always, I love fresh stuff and then I make it dry myself. So yeah, I think that's my take.
So there's some herbs that I really love to use fresh, like chickweed. Sometimes I make like a fresh valerian oil as an antispasmodic oil and such. And so I really like them fresh, and I want to preserve either those aromatics or the juicy succulence of it. But it is trickier, like I was saying. So that the method that I tend to do for making fresh plant oils is I'll put number one, do not blend your fresh plants with your oil, because you'll make an emulsification and it will be very difficult to ever remove the water out of that oil, right? So don't blend it. So if you're using fresh plants, just chop it up. Like if you're making a chickweed or a, fresh valerian root oil, or St. John's wort is something else I do fresh. And then put the herbs in the jar of oil. And then what I use is an asparagus steamer, and I make a double boiler. And then I put a little mason jar lid on the bottom. And then I have a really low little simmer flame. And so I'll put it on all day or overnight, whatever you're comfortable with. And so for 12 hours, I'll keep it about 150 degrees, right? So a nice and warm temperature. And so I'll do that for about 12 hours, right? I'll take it off the heat, let it cool down enough, and then I'll strain the oil. And then what happens is you get the oil floating on top of the water. And so you get this little schmutz, this little kind of tea, funky stuff, right, on the bottom. And so then what do, right? So you kind of decant the oil off the top, right, and get your oil. But then once you start seeing a little thread of watery tea going, oh, there it goes, then stop doing it. And one method I found is then pouring the rest of that in a funnel, or if you have any glass, thing with the top cut off, or, and then basically putting that funnel, right, in another jar and letting the oil and water settle down, right? You have to cap the funnel, right, some way with a rubber band, or if you have a percolation cone, you have to have one of those around, you can use that, but that's a fancier herbal device. But anyway, just a simple funnel, let it all settle out for an hour or so, and then basically carefully release all the water out. And then once it starts turning into oil, then you basically got all the water out, and then pour that oil back into your container, and you should have water-free oil at that point, right? So it's more complex, and that's why it's much easier. It's like I was saying, just dry it, but for something, it's well worth the effort. But yeah, if you don't get all that water out, then it's very challenging to preserve your salve or your oil, right? So oil and water just don't mix.
They just don't mix. If you do that and you have a really shelf-stable salve, it should last you about 6 months. If you do refrigerate it, it could last you about a year. So, yeah.
Great.
I find even adding I find the salves can also last for a year, even 2 years. I've had people after 7 years go, I've just run out of your salve. And I go, oh my goodness. I just I'm like, oh, that's a little too long. So make sure it doesn't go rancid. You can see the oil around the edges of the salve jar will get clear, and it'll get sticky rather than oily. And so at that point, toss it or carve away all that rancid oil. And sometimes you'll have this little bit of gold in the middle that's not rancid. But in general, toss it and start over. But, many times they can last a good few years if you have a good amount of plants infused in there and some essential oils like I was talking about.
And then I guess I would just recommend that if you're trying something new or you're experimenting, to maybe just start with a small batch and see what happens, versus using a lot of ingredients and your cost is up and adding these essential oils, and then your stuff doesn't work out. So
That sounds brilliant. All right, somebody wants to know, what kind of bag did Paula say when she was talking about straining the cider? And I heard her say a nut milk bag. Do you guys know where you get a nut milk straining bag?
You can get a fancy nut milk straining bag, probably at your local health food store or something. If you want to go low budget, you can use nylon. You can get a paint straining bag for $1.50, $2 at a paint store. Or it depends how fine you want your cider to be, do you want it clear, or is it okay that it's a little murky and has a little particulate? And so if you want it really finely strained, then maybe you do want to use, you can use muslin, like a muslin bag as well. Would be another way to do it, like forcefully strain it first through just a, sieve or normal tea strainer, and then you could put it through a tea strainer lined with muslin or a muslin cloth bag to make it really finely strained.
How about a coffee filter? Have you done that?
It would take a long time. So
For tea, for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it would take a while, but I guess you can also just let it, like probably once you coarsely strain it, most of the stuff will sink to the bottom. And so then you strain it off the top and then just put it through the coffee filter, right? You're not there. Because the coffee filter gets clogged, right? And then just goes really slow.
Right. That works for alcohol infusions. Cami, can you share the link for dry elderberries that you recommend, where to buy them?
So Mountain Rose Herbs is a really great resource for all things herbal. And they sell different varietals of elderberry. And so that's a really good kind of national resource. Really focus on options. So trust Mountain Rose. And then also get.
We're having trouble hearing you. Can you sort of point your mouth at the computer?
I would recommend like Mountain Rose Herbs or Frontier Herbs or
Pacific Botanicals.
Or what's that? Oshala Farms. A lot more people are at your farmers market because people are starting to produce elderberry more throughout the country. So.
Okay, I'm putting it in the chat. I got Mountain Rose, Frontier, Oshala. There was one in the middle there.
Botanical.
What kind of botanical? Pacific Botanical. Darn masks. All righty. All right, folks, this is your moment to speak to the experts. You can ask any question. It's a wonderful time. Oh, we got some more. Any Mountain Rose discount codes?
Sponsored by Mountain Rose. No, sorry.
No. Google it.
And somebody wants me to put it in the chat, which I did. And
we have a question for Ella. Do you have a source for your amber glass containers?
We actually have some resources at the very end, but company that I went through, glass bottle alcohol. They have very like straightforward names for the company, but typically I Google it and there's some great producing. Do you know any?
Berlin glass is one. Specialty glass. Sunburst is another company. But yeah, if anyone knows the places that you can get glass bottles not made in China or like well made.
Yeah, I don't know any like awesome ethically sourced glass resources. Unfortunately, I wish I'd come prepared.
Unless you recycle bottles, you can do that. So I brought up the slide that has some of the packaging and bottle and container resources, and you guys will get this slide deck.
If you have a friend or you have an infant, like little organic baby food jars are like awesome for salves, and babies' butts are the best place for salve. So to me, so, but salves are just so broadly useful, and one of the best gifts for like a mother expecting is a good sized jar of salve. And basically the beeswax, has this thickening agent, but it also protects the skin. It has this kind of coating and buffering. And so when you put salve on the bum and then the baby, sits in his poop or his pee for a little bit, it actually keeps the skin really safe and has high integrity. And like diaper rashes basically just doesn't happen, right? Or it's very quickly healed by the regular use of salve. So I don't know how people exist in the world without a good quality salve. So salve and sedatives, I always say, are the two like herbal things that, you know, ideally you all know about.
Okay. All righty. Are you seeing any more questions, Vanessa?
Yes, we have one that says, do the panelists recommend double or even triple infusing oil? Like a first batch infuse 2 weeks, then strain out herbs, add more into the first infusion oil, and infuse a second time for 2 weeks, then even a third for mega potency.
Well, that's wonderful. Mega potency. I mean, I think it can be, I love it. Go for it. I would say this one, what I do basically is I keep the same calendula in here. And when okay, so if I'm going to make a salve, I'm not going to use this whole thing. I'll probably use 1 cup of it, but I'll leave the calendula in here. And so when I add more oil, I'll add a little bit more dried calendula. So it'll keep infusing, but it's so it will keep getting. But I don't like strain like. But I think I have a more folky approach and not commercial in any way. So I don't know about a triple infusion. I love the idea. It sounds very extra. I appreciate things like that. But I just add in a little more herb, a little more oil. When I've used a cup, I'll add another cup. Just I always have like a full amount on me at any time. I don't know. Do you have any ideas about that?
I have an opinion, of course.
Okay, good.
Okay. So,
Yes, please.
So I think there's a couple of factors to think about. One is if you're making like a triple infusion, then are you going to be heating and then cooling that oil multiple times? And so part of the medicinal action of a salve or an oil is actually the high quality oil that you're using. So for me, I really make sure I use like a really good high quality virgin. If I'm using olive oil, I'm making sure it's like a board certified true olive oil of this year's press, right? And so then you have really high quality oil. But if you're doing these multiple like kind of heating and coolings, then you can degrade some of that medicinal quality of the oil. Also, I think if you're saturated, the oil probably gets saturated at a certain point, right? So, you know, I might, you know, for like this and folk method, I would probably tend to put like my dried herbs about up like yay high, and leave like an inch or so of, so even though, I mean, like I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's gorgeous. You know, look at that quality, that golden, you know, orange quality. And, but if you're looking for the highest potency, right? And, you know, we could talk about when do we really need high potency and when it's just enough is enough. And right. Like, so this will be a fantastic medicinal oil, but you're really concerned, then I would just like raise your herb level up, making sure that you had about an inch or so in between. And I've seen oils be so helpful and so potent at that I don't think there's a need for a second and a third batch. And I think at a certain point, all the oil is saturated with constituents. And so unless you have, it's really cheap and you have a lot of time, the herbs are cheap that you're working with and you have a lot of time to do it, I think just one good shot with good quality oil, good quality herbs, I think you're right on target. And
that's quicker and easier too. We had in the chat a shout out for Chinese medicinal plant starts at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center in Occidental. Yay, yay. And the Chinese Medicinal Herb Farm in Petaluma. I buy a lot of seeds from them.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Good practice, highest seed quality, all that. Wow. All right.
Vanguard plant sale, right? Hopefully it's going to be happening again next year.
Cameron, do you know when your plant sale is happening next?
I'm gonna have one probably mid-spring, early mid-spring. So like May.
And how will people find out about it?
I have a website where you can sign up for my newsletter, and then I announce plant sales. I'm also on social media, Instagram and Facebook. But the website, the newsletter is a good way to find out.
Okay, well, your website is listed on this presentation all over the place, so people should be getting that in a couple of days.
I can make a little plug for a moment. That's okay. I'm not on social media, or you could probably find me somewhere, and I don't have a mailing list. But historically, I've always done salve making classes, like holiday gift salve making classes. And in this era, it's been a little harder to advertise. But if you have a group of people and you want to like schedule one, I have a space and a facility, and I basically go through the whole process of making salves, and you leave with 8 jars of salve as holiday gifts. So you have my contact information, so we could dialogue if you really want to see it all, and yeah.
All right, so that's a private party situation that people can set up with you.
And Darren has a beautiful garden and apothecary, so you get a lot when you sign up.
What do you say we do it? Let's do it. I love it. All right. The questions are winding down. We are winding down. It's been a long day. Thank you so much. You guys are just such an incredible font of knowledge. And if anybody has questions specifically about the fire cider, we will get those to Paula and we can get them answered pretty soon. The Friends of the Farm and Garden are going to take a break in December. We're not going to have any classes, but we're going to start up again in January. So have happy holidays, everyone. Thank you all for attending and thank you for teaching.
Thanks,
Sure, oil.
Yeah, big thing.
everyone.
I'm going